I'm going to talk about something here this morning that I've touched on somewhat very lightly, but I'm going to detail this considerably. This is factual, historic information. It's true. What we have here is this situation where people have gotten so involved thinking that they can shoot at our beautiful wildlife, our game animals, at 1,000+ yards. Now, I've talked about this before, but I really don't think that people understand the magnitude of this situation. So I'm going to detail it, and I'm going to start from the get-go, where this long-range situation really started. It started with a group of people back in the 1950s in the Williamsport, Pennsylvania area. Involved gunsmiths, people that like to shoot, people that hunted, and one thing another. And this developed into a situation that I felt, even at the time, was somewhat undesirable. And that's shooting game at long range. 1,000 yards. In some instances, back in those days, they were shooting white-tailed deer out around about a mile. Now, some of the people then was Howard Wolf. He was a gunsmith. He built a lot of the rifles. There was another man by the name of Wright-hoyer. Another man by the name of Colonel Paul Wright. There's another man that was involved with the situation by the name of Earl Chronister. Now, I have a friend that'll be 90 years old his next birthday. And back in the early 50s, this man visited in that part of the country, which was this group of people. They're building actually benchrest rifles to shoot 1,000+ yards with 1¼ inch diameter barrels, 30 inches long, starting out shooting by the 7x61 sharpened Hart, developed by Phil Sharp and Richard Hart, and the .308 Norma Magnum. These were two of the early cartridges that were used, and just about all that we had at the point in time in the accuracy department were Sierra bullets. I'm not saying that that's all that they used, but that was a go-to bullet, a Sierra bullet. Now, in that part of the country, there were 3 adjacent farms. Took up a lot of country. And they mounted benchrests in the back of pickup trucks. And they drove around the rolling hills of that Pennsylvania hill country where these white-tailed deer lived. And there was the man that was behind the gun. There were individuals with Barn-Stroud military rangefinders. They had high-power spotting scopes, high-power binoculars, high-power battleship binoculars. There were even people using binoculars that were actually 2 spotting scopes mounted together to form a pair of binoculars in that day and age. Now, these people were using unilateral target scopes with external adjustments. Now, you might sneer at this today to do with internal adjustments, but if you're sneering at it, you don't have the first clue in the world, because these internal adjustment scopes were always repeatable. They worked extremely, extremely well. And there are still people using these unilateral target scopes and other target scopes with external adjustments. There's no other situation involved like there is with the internal adjustments of the scopes. The scope simply adjusts for elevation and or windage, and you can repeat. You simply have to keep a record of where you've dialed to and where you need to dial to. Now this was in a day and age when people had to figure out all these things on their own. They figured out these things in their mind. They weren't hung up like the newbies of today on a BC, a Blitz's coefficient, which is simply an assigned number based on a perfect model. Well, I have stated in the past, and I'm stating now, that Blitz's coefficients are not constant. They're changing all the time. And Sierra said many years ago that the Blitz's coefficient out to 1,000 yards changed around 4 times. Well, we've got people thinking that a Blitz's coefficient is a constant. We've had an entity that came out a few years ago and said that Blitz's coefficients are not constant. And they are not constant. I've proven this shooting from my bench, shooting at longer range, and invariably there's a point downrange where this basically changes. And I have proven this by my actual shooting with many rifles over many times on an extremely still perfect day. And there are damn few still perfect days here in Wyoming. And anyway, these fellas were shooting these white-tailed deer, and there were situations where, you know, they were shooting considerably past 1,000 yards. This old friend of mine, who's very experienced and hunted, came from that part of the country, not far from there, you know, made it a point to visit with these fellas because he was interested in what they were doing, and they were very free with their information, very free with visiting, and one thing and another about what they were doing. Well, they had killed a deer that morning just as he got there at something around 1,700 yards. Well, I'm going to tell you the truth of the matter is, this deer stood there for somewhere pushing 40 minutes before he ever fell over. Because you got to understand, the bullet was hitting the deer and the bullet wasn't expanding. It wasn't delivering any type of terminal performance that we seem to understand today. And in all actuality, the deer bled out inside. And when he bled out inside and it filled his body cavity, he didn't have anything more to run on, and he simply fell over. Now, quite frankly, I don't think this is the thing to be doing. I didn't think so at the time. I've read many years ago in Precision Shooting magazine, and there were another magazine which I'm not sure what it was in, but I remember it being in another magazine talking about these situations as shooting at this extreme range. These people were founders of this type of shooting. They were the pioneers of this ego-driven situation to shoot at this long distance. Now they had heavy guns. They weren't using lightweight 9-10 pound sporter rifles. Some of their rifles weighed upwards of 100 pounds. A lot of these rifles weighed 35 pounds easy with a heavy barrel, you know. And they basically shot single shot. You know, there's records of this, some of this information, of some of the loads that were used. And there's records of information of who actually first thought up the 6.5 by 300 Weatherby. It wasn't called the 6.5 by 300 Weatherby, it was called the 6.5 by 300 Weatherby Wright-Hoyer, after Colonel Paul Wright and Alex Hoyer. Now, the crowd at Weatherby here in Sheridan, Wyoming, seems to think that it was Roy Weatherby. It wasn't Roy Weatherby. It was Colonel Paul Wright and Alex Hoyer. And I have a friend who has 3 of Bob Wolf's rifles that he built for this purpose. One is actually a sporting rifle, the other heavier benchrest guns with target scopes on them, and one thing another. And I had ammunition here that was basically shot in these rifles here this spring. And the actual dimension from the head to the shoulder on these cases was considerably further than the actual 6.5 by 300 Weatherby as we know it, by simply necking down the 300 Weatherby to 6.5 caliber. The shoulder was considerably further ahead, and you could hold a fired case from a today 6.5 by 300 Weatherby and see that the shoulder was further ahead on the 6.5 by 300 Weatherby Wright-Hoyer. I have no explanation for why. I've tried to contact somebody to maybe get further into this and figure out why, and I have not been able to. The person that I've tried to contact has not been interested in talking. So anyway, one of the main purposes of why I'm talking about this today is because these were the pioneers. These were the pioneers. These were the people doing this. Now today, we have an entity here 20-some miles away from me in Cody, Wyoming, which some of you have, I'm sure, heard about, Best of the West. Best of the West is claiming that they are the pioneers of long-range hunting. This is a flat joke. This is absolutely a flat joke. And that's exactly how one of these gun builders from that part of the country put it to me. He knows what's going on. He knows that it's a great big damn joke. This guy happens to be a gun builder from that part of the country and has been building guns for many, many years, second generation, to these people that originally came up with these ideas. And furthermore, Best of the West has got a TV type program, and it's called Addicted to the Outdoors. And they're stating on there that they are the pioneers of long-range hunting. I'll unequivocally state again, they are not the pioneers of long-range hunting. Almost everything that's going on today, we've got these people that have come around that don't have the first clue what's really the story. But they want to just simply get an idea today, and all of a sudden, they're the pioneers. Well, I'm afraid that they've missed this by 50-some odd years of being the pioneer of long-range hunting. You see? Now, I'm going to get into the real nitty-gritty of this whole thing, and that is, in this area, it's a known fact. I have acquaintances, I have friends, and one thing another that have been in the field hunting, where there's some of these people with some of these long-range, so-called long-range 1,000-yard rifles that are nothing but 1,000-yard rifles that probably won't shoot an 1.5 or 2-inch damn group at 100 yards, let alone any kind of group at a distance. Might shoot a pattern. I had a fella here a few years ago that's been my mechanic for over 40 years that hunts some of this country, and he has witnessed, along with a friend, five men with these rifles from one of these entities promoting this 1,000-yard plus shooting at well over 1,000 yards, shooting 5 different rifles, firing over 150 rounds of ammunition, crippling a couple of elk, never going to recover the cripples, and just go on and leave. Now, this is a sad situation, and even our game department hasn't pursued this properly. They've been made aware of it, and one thing and another, but unfortunately, we've got a game department that's looking the other way, and I don't know exactly why, but it's not right. Now, we can go on and on with this. We've got situations where people that claim to be these long-range experts, not only just one entity, but several entities, that are claiming one-shot kills and one thing and another at 1,000 plus yards, when in actuality, it was never a one-shot kill. It might have been 7, 8, 10, 12, 13 shots or maybe more, and hit the animal once or twice, and the animal is suffering for an hour, hour and a half before somebody gets in close and finishes it off, and then the videographer is ordered by one of these entities to be able to doctor up this film to make it look like a one-shot kill. And when they air these things on a TV show, the phone rings off the hook to buy rifles. Well, this is actually what's going on. I know of a situation where there was a fellow tied into one of these entities that happens to be an outfitter and a guide, and specializes to do with guiding bighorn sheep hunts, high-priced bighorn sheep hunts. And I know for a fact that there were many, many bighorn rams that were wounded, that were never recovered. And this is a sad, sad situation. And I can go on and on. I have detailed information from a videographer that worked for quite a number of years and was required to have to do this for one of these entities. And they claim to be experts. Well, it's real obvious to me that they're not experts. If you have to fire 7, 8, 10, 12 and more rounds at an animal, and you don't get it killed, and you have to close into 75 yards an hour and a half later, while the animal suffered, this is not expert. This is a bunch of false advertising. It's simply not ethical in any way, shape, or form. It shouldn't be going on. But you see, people are really, really gullible. And even some of these people that even know this, they don't even care. And it's real obvious the person that has encouraged this from one of these entities, he doesn't care either. There might be himself, the videographer, a spotter or two, and maybe several other people around. So there's 4 or 5 witnesses to these sort of shenanigans that are going on to do with the so-called experts to do a long-range hunting. These are nothing but slobs. These are nothing but slobs that are trying to, depict a one-shot kill when it's never been a one-shot kill. It's the furthest thing from that. It's being very, very dishonest, disingenuous. It's not being fair to our wildlife. In this part of Wyoming where I live, it's sorry. The elk situation is sorry. The deer situation is sorry. Our moose are nearly all gone. A lot of our bighorn sheep are gone. And this sort of thing just keeps going on and on. And in some of these situations, there are instances where they pursued another animal and actually shot at and maybe wounded another animal and maybe never even recover that, and maybe never get an animal because they've been shooting too far. You see, you can't order a rifle, get it in your hands, have a hunt located book someplace, and all of a sudden take a rifle that you have never used. You might have been to the range with it, you might not have been to the range, and shoot this rifle. You're not capable. Neither are the people that are trying to promote this information. Neither are they capable. This is not regularly going on. But I can tell you one thing. This long-range shooting is still going on in the Far East, in the Pennsylvania area. There's a range that was founded by these original long-range pioneers that's about 20 miles from Williamsport, Pennsylvania, off of Route 14 at Bodines, Pennsylvania. That's where they're shooting. These people know how to shoot. But these people that are involved today with using normal weight sporting type rifles, not benchrest real accuracy rifles or anything of that sort, which I'm still not encouraging that, but it even makes it worse. But it really, really gets in my craw really, really deeply when I learn of all these things, and I've known it before people even told me about it. I have numerous people that have told me, and had a fella that detailed this information to me that was a videographer of what's going on with this situation. And it needs to be very, very clear. There's a quarter-page ad out in a magazine called Rifle Shooter Magazine. It's on page 38. I believe it's the September-October issue of Rifle Shooter Magazine, claiming to be the pioneers of this long-range hunting. They are not the pioneers. Same way with what's being said time after time on this Addicted to the Outdoor show. And I guess if you tell a lie often enough, it becomes fact. You just keep lying and you just keep lying and lying and lying. Because this is exactly what's going on here. You see, there are numerous people all around the country that build very nice rifles, very accurate rifles, that are well experienced gun makers such as myself, that build some wonderful rifles. But it's all coming right out of this part of the country. Right here, 20 miles from me, out of Cody, Wyoming, where this situation just keeps growing and growing and growing, and it just keeps going on, and it gets worse as the time goes by. Now, I don't know exactly what the answer is, but it needs to stop. Misinformation, the disingenuousness, the lies, those things need to stop. And it's too bad that people have bought into some of this, because this is exactly how they've bought into it, because they've been deceived. They've been deceived. I've hunted game for 59 years, and I've been on a lot of game kills, and I know what's reasonable, I know what's unreasonable. I know from experience what you can do and what you can't do in real hunting situations. It's a vast difference between shooting at a range someplace at a solid bench with sandbags than in the field in a hunting type of a situation with a hunting weight rifle. It just doesn't work. We have too many variables involved. Tremendous amount of variables involved to do with the conditions, to do with the change of ballistic coefficient as the bullet travels downrange, the time of day, wind, barometric pressure, you name it. It's all there. So don't don't think for a minute that this is an actuality. There's a rare situation where something has been taken at longer range, 1,000 yards or perhaps further, but I'll guarantee you, the one-shot kill, that's a laughing joke. Lately I've become acquainted somewhat of another gun builder, and this gun builder happens to be from the Pennsylvania area and knew some of these old timers that came up with this, and he builds these rifles specific for shooting, benchrest rifles for shooting long range. Now this man made a trip in the past several years here to the Rifle, Colorado area, and he became acquainted with a man that owned a welding shop there, having needed something done to do with a rig or something that they had to do with welding. The guy became a friend. Well, anyway, a year or two later, he was back in the country hunting, and a guy comes into the welding shop. Well, he's there, and this guy is claiming to have shot an elk, and he's got the rack and one thing another, and he claims to have range find this elk at 2,950 yards. So this fellow that I've become acquainted with asked him what he was shooting. He said a 300 Winchester Magnum. Well, run it through all your ballistics information that you're all hung up on, folks, to do with downrange energy, to do with drops and everything else, and figure out what kind of energy and what kind of drop there is with a 300 Winchester Magnum rifle shooting factory 180 grain factory ammunition at 2,950 yards. Now this guy had a picture of this bull that he had shot. It was a big rack bull. Now he shot 3 legs off of this elk. This elk couldn't stand on 3 legs, and he was down. He finally went down when the 3rd leg was taken off this elk. The elk dropped and was laying there, and it was late in the day. And the guy went the next day, and this elk lifted its head up. It was still alive the next day. And he finished off this elk, and he's going around the country there, around Rifle, Colorado, bragging about this situation. Do you get it? Do you get it, folks? I tell you, there's absolutely no respect. And if this sort of thing just keeps right on going, there's going to be a day when there's nothing left to hunt. We're going to lose it. These guys have brought about the worst reputation to do with hunting of anything that's going on. This sort of thing's going on all over. Shooting something late in the day, for instance, and not going to it and finding it the next day, and one thing another. Even people that are shooting from a tree stand or a blind, a tree house or something of that nature. And I'm not specifically, even with that situation, talking about long range. I could be talking about a 200-yard shot. Well, if they haven't bothered, they'd go the next day, and of course it's spoiled. That elk was spoiled, you see. That elk was spoiled. It was all fevered up. It wasn't fit to eat, and one thing another. I don't know. I don't know why, with this kind of information, if I was a man in the game department, if I was a game warden, I'd be looking up somebody like this. And I believe you me, there'd be something come out of it. There'd be something that would be done. Because I wouldn't let it slide. I wouldn't let it go. There's such a thing as right and wrong. And this is beyond, even beyond, the description of wrong. This is what's happened. And this isn't just isolated to the hunting situation. This is in a lot of situations that are just simply wrong. It shouldn't be going on. We're at a point in time to do with hunting and many, many other aspects where nobody gives a damn about anything. They just want to get a picture and stroke their egos with something that they've shot and one thing and another. And they think nothing. They think nothing of walking away from a situation or leaving an animal to suffer, leaving an animal that they've shot at extreme range because they can't find it, because they were doing the wrong damn thing in the first place. You need to be doing some thinking. But nobody's doing any thinking here because they don't give a damn. This is the bottom line of this. They do not give a damn about any of it. And this is why I'm talking about this, because nobody gives a damn. They don't care about that. They think nothing about lying and lying and lying and lying. As long as they get what they want out of it. Now, this wildlife wasn't here to be treated this way. I've hunted from day one for meat, and I have some very nice trophies that I've collected over a lifetime. But that's not my main purpose. And my main purpose has never been to see how damn far away that I can kill an elk and so forth. And I've killed a lot of elk. I know how to hunt. And it's very slim today because of what's happened with everything that's going on, not only with what I'm talking about here, but the absolutely unacceptable no management in some aspects to do with our wildlife. And eventually, it's going to be all gone, and people are going to be wondering why. Well, I'm giving you a few clues here. Do something about it. Don't be involved with this stupidity. Care. Hunt properly. And do what's right, not what's wrong. Putting yourself first and everything else last. You think you're putting yourself first, but you're actually showing what kind of true colors you're about. You simply don't give a damn.